Hello and welcome to On the Record with White and Case, the podcast about the fast-paced and dynamic world of big law. Whether you're considering a career in big law, studying at law school, or already one of us, this podcast is for you. I'm Barbara Brooks Andrews, and I'm part of the firm's recruiting team. And today, I'm joined by Andrew Farmer, Associate Director of Employee Experience and Employer Brand Communications, and Arlene Hahn, the Global Head of our Technology Transactions Practice within the firm's Global M&A Group and a member of our Partnership Committee. Andrew, Arlene, welcome to On the Record. We are delighted to have you here today to discuss the topic of creating your personal brand and to talk about why it's important. Before we start, could you please tell our listeners a little bit about yourselves, your legal journey, what your work entails, and how long you've been at White & Case?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. So I've been at the firm for just over 6 years. And as you mentioned, I oversee employee experience and employer brand communications. A lot of people have no idea what that means, so I can explain it in a little bit more detail. I oversee communications that go right across the employee life cycle. So if you think about when we're recruiting people, how we articulate ourselves as a brand to prospective recruits, and then once they're in, how we onboard people, how do we tell that career journey, that career story throughout the firm and throughout their entire career here, whether that's their learning and development journey, their growth at the firm, right the way through to potentially transitioning out of the firm. And of course, on the employer brand side, again, it's just all how we bring it to life for prospective recruits. How do we sell ourselves as a firm, as a great employer? My legal journey, I suppose, is an interesting one because I haven't always worked in law firms. I started life in internal communications for a hospitality company that own a number of different hotel brands. And I was pretty much focused on internal communications for a HR function. So I focused on a number of different things, which focused on HR programs. I then fell into employer branding within that same company. And then I moved into the professional services world. And then I saw, obviously, this role come up, 6 years ago. And working in a law firm, I did really question it because I'd never really pictured myself in that type of environment. Initially, and I think a lot of business professionals think this, you think it's very stuffy, very corporate or overly corporate. But to be honest, I think the minute I met the people that I was working with or, who I would be working with, it was just fantastic. The range of projects that were here, it is very fast paced, but I think there's so many opportunities for business professionals in law firms because of the nature of the work and how quickly things change. And also, we talk about it a lot, but I do have to mention it. We're a really global firm. So I've met people from all over the world. I'm based in London and I'm here in New York. So it's fantastic.
Thank you and welcome. Arlene?
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm Arlene. As you mentioned, I am the global head of our technology transactions practice. I was actually never supposed to be a lawyer. I had never met a lawyer until I went to law school. So the reason I became one is because I went to MIT. And while I was there, I was supposed to go to med school. And I decided I wasn't sure I wanted to be a doctor. And law seemed like a jumping off point to figure out what I ultimately wanted to do. And once I went to law school and I started learning about IP law in particular, I was really fascinated by it. And I've been a lawyer ever since. I started my career at another firm. I was there for 16 years. And then I joined White & Case almost 9 years ago. And I've been here ever since. Practicing technology transactions, which is really the IP and technology-driven aspects of both corporate transactions like M&A and capital markets, but also standalone IP-driven transactions like licensing agreements, joint development agreements, things like that.
Great. Wow, from MIT pre-med to law school and White & Case. So on to our topic, what are some tips and best practices for building a great personal brand at different stages of your career?
Yeah, I think this is such a good topic, and it's one that I think continually evolves when depending on what level you are at your career, there's always something you can work on and there's always something that you can do more of. I like to see the personal brand as an experience, and I kind of think, your brand should really let people know what you offer, what you stand for, what you're about, what your values are, and ultimately, what you can bring to the table, how you show up every day. And I think there's, in terms of tips, there's so many things that you could talk about, whether it's networking, whether it's really thinking about actually how you want to communicate your brand. I think also just thinking about it from an in-person perspective versus the digital world as well. I think both go hand in hand together. I think that the biggest thing, though, for me is, I always think about it's about being visible, whether that's in person or online. And that doesn't always mean, you have to be putting yourself out there in really uncomfortable ways that makes you come across the wrong way and being, maybe too loud or, too putting yourself out there too much. I think it's just about being visible to those stakeholders, those people, those networks that you want to be seen in, that you want to be perceived as a thought leader in your career journey, or somebody that you want to, be more influential with. But it's about being visible. It's about raising your hand to new opportunities and really putting yourself out there.
Thank you, Andrew. During the recruitment process, there may be several opportunities to sell oneself in person. I know, Andrew, you mentioned there's an in-person personal brand and also a digital online brand. Arlene, how do you best position yourself in person in an interview, at a networking event, or with your key stakeholders?
Well, so fundamentally, this is a service business, right? And so at law firms, or whether you're a lawyer in-house, you are the product. And so to Andrew's point, the key is visibility. You want to make sure that people know who you are, that you're memorable, and that they actually see you or see your message. The second, I think, part of your brand is, what are you offering? What is your expertise? What is your authority? What is your experience? And so I think when you are interviewing in particular, the interviews that I remember when I'm meeting new candidates are things that are memorable about them, things that make me want to work with them. So whether it's because they had an incredible experience that was a legal experience, or whether they had an incredible past, a past story that they told me, or even if they just have a wonderful positive presence and someone who seems like they have a lot of grit and determination and someone who's a problem solver, those are the things that can be aspects of someone's personal brand that I find particularly memorable in a interviewing context and make me want to meet that person again, or have them meet my colleagues in a callback.
I think that's a really good point as well, because I
Yeah.
think especially for junior recruits, they're probably thinking, oh, I have no experience. What do I have to offer? But I think, the number one thing is about being yourself in all of this. It's not about creating this persona that's completely different from you. Because I think the most important thing is to be yourself. And you can't shine in the best way without being really comfortable and true to who you are. So I think thinking about all of those points that Arlene just mentioned, and, those best attributes of yourself, as a junior person, you're likely not to have, a wealth of experience, especially in the industry that you really want to go into and learn from. But it's about building that and showcasing the willingness of doing something, or even experiences that have helped contribute to the fact that you're in the recruitment seat in that day. So I think there's loads of things you can think about. And I think as you grow within your career, that obviously builds, and there's different things that you might want to talk about and bring to the table for your personal brand and be known for, especially if your intention eventually is to go work your way up the career ladder and become more of in a leadership role.
I think that's such a good point, especially for junior lawyers. You're not expected to have the expertise or the authority yet. So my advice has always been, control what you can control. Be your authentic self, obviously show up on time, be responsive, be communicative, and if you can, be the best version of yourself, because people are attracted to that type of, positivity and to growth mindset and to authenticity most of all.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really a wonderful point. We don't all have to be superhuman in order to be successful in an in-person interview. Andrew, what about communicating your personal brand online? For example, building a profile that really stands out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point, and one that just is more important year on year, I find. And I think with such a platform like LinkedIn, I think first and foremost, I think it's still really important to be visible in person. I think you still cannot beat those in-person connections. You get so much off just presenting yourself in person. There's body language there. You build a really great network with that. But obviously, to support all of that, and we are often in an online world, whether that's when we're communicating globally with people on video conferences, or could even be in an interview scenario, I think your online profiles are really, really important. And I think as you start to enter the working world, you then have to think about, okay, what about not even just LinkedIn? What about all my other online profiles? What's out there that could impact my personal brand in the future? It could be as simple as, should I really revisit some of my tweets? Is that what I would want to be known for? But if someone's reading a tweet that I sent 5 years ago, or Facebook profiles or Instagram profiles, having those more of within your private circle of followers and friends. But I think LinkedIn in particular, because it is a professional networking platform, getting that right is so critical, whether that's having a really great profile photo, all of the kind of basic elements that present yourself well in the virtual environment, but also having a really great summary of yourself. And again, this is something we talk about quite often internally, but it's about revisiting that profile as you grow within your career. Mm-hmm. So LinkedIn was often seen as an online CV where you just literally listed all of your jobs, including those that aren't really relevant in your professional working world now. But that summary profile, I almost see it as your online elevator pitch. This should be the one thing that really sells yourself, that showcases your personality, your interests, your values, everything you stand for within, 300 or 400 words. So I think nailing that is a really critical piece. But also, before you kind of launch straight into it on the profile, I always think about drafting that, working through a number of different versions of it, and getting someone you know and trust that can review that, critique it before you just go out and put it online.
Yeah, no, I think the importance of a first impression cannot be underestimated, really.
Yeah, completely. And I think even when you meet people in person, especially in a professional environment, they always go and check you out on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
it's one of those things that you just want
reflex.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We often hear about the importance of cultivating a professional network, which can seem daunting to many people. Do you have any advice or strategies for effectively building and maintaining such a network?
So I feel like I made a mistake very early on in my career, and I kind of separated church and state. I had my work colleagues and I had my personal friends, and I didn't combine them. And I never considered that they should be combined, and actually holistically having one group of contacts is the best way, not just to live professionally, but also personally. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're in law school, if you're in college, anyone who's in your network that you've worked with, any professors that you've, TA'd for or assisted, anyone that you've met can be in the future a professional contact. And so making sure that you are keeping your mind open and flexible on who you actually have in your network. And our networks are always larger than we think they are. Mm-hmm. And also, what are the potential synergies and relationships that you can have with those individuals? Are there things you can help them with? Is there someone at White & Case, even if it's not you, is there someone at your firm who could help their company? And really thinking flexibly about how you can not just tap your personal network for yourself personally, but how you can expand your relationships by introducing your network to others in your network.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important point, that it's not just about taking and receiving information, but about giving and finding out ways where you can also provide assistance to someone else out there with their career.
Yeah. I think it's not easy to put yourself out there as well and to start building a network. And you already have a network without you even really thinking about it. But I think if you really want to fine-tune that network, I think, doing simple exercises such as looking at a stakeholder map, it sounds a little bit silly, but it could just be as simple as writing a list of all the people you want to really connect with or build those relationships with. Because of their of influence, you want to be known in their world, but also you want them to know, as to Arlene's point, what you can also give back to them. And I think just putting yourself out there, taking advantage of networking events where either your workplace puts them on or your law schools or any type of event that really you can meet new people. But I think it's about identifying who and why you want to connect with those individuals and how it works both ways. I think sometimes it's easier to sit back and think it would all come to me. Eventually I will build this network. It will just happen. But I think sometimes you have to just put yourself out there, dive into somewhere where it's a little bit uncomfortable and work with it that way. Especially if you're lucky enough to work in a global organization where you have hundreds of, if not thousands of people within reach. You all have something in common, is the fact that you work at the same place. And there's always a way to strike up a conversation. So I think looking at the opportunities and just thinking about it and, putting yourself out there.
I would also say that some of the best business developers that I've known in my career really treat this as a discipline. So they take a few moments or an hour every single day to reach out to individuals in their network. And it doesn't have to be something major like a lunch, but just a text or a LinkedIn post or, giving them a quick call. And just keeping those relationships alive is a great way to build up your network. I think another great piece of advice that I've gotten when I joined White and Case actually was to go to everything. And I went to every event that White and Case held, even if it was completely unrelated to me and my practice. And it was such a fantastic way to meet people. And people assume I'm an extrovert. I'm actually very much like 49% introvert. So it's hard for me to walk into a room and just introduce myself to people. But I forced myself to do that coming to this firm. And eventually you will meet someone who knows everybody. They've been here for 30 years or they, started off here. And that person then becomes the conduit for you and can walk you around and say, hey, Andrew, this is Barbara. Hey, Barbara, this is Andrew. And once you have a couple facilitators like that, it gets much easier.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So casting a wide net, thinking about, who's been here for quite a long time, maybe going back further in your life where you went to undergrad. I know there's certain alumni groups that are very active who continually reach out to their alumni to connect.
I think that whole value of nurturing those relationships over time, that there's never like a stop point, I don't think. I think regardless of where you are in your career, it can always feel daunting. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really good to just know that that's always going to be the case, unless you're an expert at this and you feel completely natural with it, which I'm sure many people don't. But there's never that, okay, I'm done now, my network's complete. I've completed it.
No, absolutely. So, one of the best metaphors I've heard is it's like getting in shape. You can't just be like, tomorrow I'm in shape. Like you have to consistently, work out, eat well, all of that. And you eventually build up to a point where you can slip a little bit, but that's after you've actually gotten in shape.
Yeah.
I like the idea of just a little bit at a time.
Right.
It's same as, getting in shape. It's true. But sending an article to someone that they think they might be of interest, knowing when someone's birthday is, little things like that, I think can be helpful.
Yeah. And I always think, don't assume that people just know you've done a great job on something. Everyone is busy in their own world, often thinking about what they're doing as well. So I never feel afraid really to open up that dialogue and conversation about a great piece of work you've worked on, something that you've led. It doesn't have to come across as braggy or boastful. It's actually just being really proud of what you've done. So I think that's another really great way of, reaching out to people and sharing that with others, so you can build those networks and put yourself out there in a way that showcases what you actually do and what you do well.
That's a really great point, because you can send a link to something you've done. You don't necessarily have to sort of sell all the time, which is really great.
Yeah.
And one tip on that, if it feels sometimes icky to self-promote or to say, I did this wonderful thing, is to grab a friend or a colleague and align together. And I would post something about you and say, everybody, look at what Andrew just did. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And what it does is it showcases you, but it also kind of showcases the person who is, posting it about you because they're so proud of their friend. But that kind of takes the ickiness away of saying, look how great I am.
Very true.
So in terms of creating an action plan for developing your personal brand, like what steps would you take in what order, just for someone who's quite new at this?
Yeah, I'd really scale it back and think about what is it you want to be known for? And sometimes just writing this on paper is the best way of doing it. What is it you want to be known for? Where do you want to go in your career? Where do you see yourself in, not even 10 years' time, just like 2 years' time? Take those baby steps in terms of, and how you could get there. And then you kind of just figure out, I think, what are those steps? Who do I need to meet? What are the projects I want to get involved in? And I think also just keeping your eye out on things, making sure that if there are opportunities that present themselves, you put yourself forward, raise your hand, don't wait to be asked to do it, because sometimes that never happens. So make sure people know that you're open to new opportunities, that kind of thing.
Now, I completely agree with Andrew. I think starting with introspective moments and really thinking about who you are, what your strengths are, but also what's your ultimate goal, where do you want to be? And then extrapolating inward. I think one great way of doing that is talking to your trusted friends, talking to your colleagues, asking them what your strengths are, and are those strengths things that align with who you think you are and who you want to be or where you want to go. And I think once you have that picture in mind, then you can start building the steps that get you from who you are today to where you want to be as far as your personal brand.
I think also just following, whether it's an online thing, but maybe people who you find insightful, looking at what they do, look at their behavior, look at how they interact in the workplace, that can be really just so inspiring. And I think just very, very useful, because then you can think about if that's somebody that you want to be like, or in a position that they're holding, that's a really great way of also just visualizing it for yourself. The same online, start following influential people that you really admire. And if that's something that you want to be doing, I think it's a really great way to visualize it for yourself, but to also give you some tips and advice on how to get there. And give you that confidence as well.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe it could be daring to ask that person out for a coffee, or sending them a message on LinkedIn just to see if you could have a 5-minute conversation with them.
Yeah. And I think just taking an interest, and I think that individual is always going to be receptive to thinking, this individual wants to learn more about what I do in my world. So yeah, having a conversation, having a coffee. And I think it comes down to being visible again. I think it's that, I just can't stress how important that is, to, especially the in-person moments, to really make sure that, when opportunities do present themselves, you could be front of mind for that particular piece of work or assignment, whatever it might be. But yeah, reaching out, having coffee, making conversation.
Although there's one thing I want to note on that, which is we have, I feel like, reached a point where people do reach out often and say, I've never met you. I saw your bio on the website. I saw that you did this deal. I saw your name in a newspaper. I would love to grab coffee and you can give me advice on how I can, become a lawyer like you, or how I can get a job at White & Case, or something like that. And I applaud that because sometimes it works. But I will say that having been on the recipient end of that, sometimes there's just no way that the people that you are reaching out to can meet with everybody who reaches out to them. So what I've found personally that has been really effective is be visible, but be somewhat helpful to me. Don't say, hey, can I grab time with you on your schedule? Say, I found this article that I thought you would find really interesting. One day in the future, maybe we would be able to meet, but not necessarily intruding on their day or their schedule immediately, but kind of increasing kind of the touch points and the visibility, but not necessarily asking for anything, particularly if you don't know the person yet.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know, especially if you don't know them, because it can feel intrusive or one-sided.
Exactly.
Doing it
Yeah,
for
it's
self-gain.
like, right. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think touch points that involve giving people something that you think, based on your research, will be of interest to them can be a gift, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Or this is what I've been up to. Just thought I would send it along.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One of our favorite segments on the podcast is called Off the Record. And it's where we ask you to recall a time when events unfolded unexpectedly, some sort of like comic blunder or mishap that underscored the contrast between expectation and reality. Do you have any stories? It's basically the human side of life.
Yeah, when you originally asked about this question, I instantly knew which thing I would say.
Oh, good.
And it does relate to personal branding somewhat as well, which is so as all these kind of moments do anyway. I was having a really busy day and I was jumping onto the next call, and in my calendar I must have clicked on the wrong invite. It was a virtual call and I didn't know, but I clicked on an invite from somebody from the previous day, and they had their room unlocked on their on their WebEx. So I obviously walk in, virtually, and interrupt a call, but with some very, very senior stakeholders that I won't mention any names of, who I'd never met before, and I kind of had to just roll with it and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And luckily the person, I knew them very well, whose meeting they were actually hosting, and we kind of made a joke about it. But of course it's mortifying at the time, because you just think, oh my gosh, this person's going to think I'm an absolute idiot. I can't even go into the right meeting online. But they were very good about it. They were very we made it very lighthearted, and I think you just have to embrace those moments, because we are all human.
Right.
And sometimes you just walk into the wrong meeting room.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful that they were gracious about it.
Yeah, and we did have a good laugh about it afterwards.
Oh, that's good.
And you can always blame it on the technology. There was a time,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
it
What
was
people
putting
still
us in the
do.
wrong
Yeah.
rooms.
I'm on
so.
mute.
Exactly. Oops, lost my connection. So this doesn't have to do with personal branding, but it is a story about the difference maybe between expectation and reality. Many years ago, both of my parents had died and a couple years apart. And when I got back from my father's funeral, I ran into a very good friend in PA. And she said, "How have you been?" And I said, "Oh, not so great. My dad died." And she said, "Oh, my cat just died." And she continued to tell me for about 3 or 4 minutes about her cat and how wonderful her cat was and going into kind of great detail about the cat. And at the end, she said, "How old was your dog?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, my dad died." And she was instantly mortified. And I felt so terrible for her because she didn't need to feel bad. But she's like, "I just went on and on about my cat and I'm so sorry." But it was one of those moments where you feel that the person is not aware of what they were saying. And so.
Well, thank you both so much for coming and talking about this very important topic of personal branding.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
You can learn more about our work, our people, and opportunities that we offer at inside.whitecase.com and on our social media channels. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Whitecase. On the Record is for you, our listeners, so we want to hear from you. Email your thoughts, questions, and topic ideas to us at usgradrecruiting@whitecase.com. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss out on more episodes.